Well, Darius was an extremely nice, charming, witty, hard-working, self-deprecating guy. He had been on that series before Pop Idol called Pop Stars, where actually things hadn't gone so well, and he'd become a bit of a sort of laughing stock in a way with his ponytail and his Britney Spears impersonation. So when we heard he wanted to actually audition for Pop Idol, I think we were slightly resistant to start with, but he kept persisting. That was the interesting thing. And actually, once he got on the show, we realized he had listened to every bit of advice and criticism he had been given, took it all on board, didn't take it personally, just try to work out what he could do to get better. And actually, as a young guy, he really learned quickly and was a very talented and lovely fella. And that's, I think, he got into the public's heart slightly because he clearly was the underdog when he started on Pop Idol and then got better and better. And as those weeks went on and as that series became something of a phenomenon at the time, it was incredible that he ended up in that final 10 and then ended up third behind Gareth and Will. And I think we all really liked Darius. I mean, he really was a charming guy. He got a lovely family as well. His mum and dad were always at the TV shows, were really interested in how he was doing. Did we really think he was good? Do we think he's got a chance? I mean, they really were very caring. And obviously for them, his family, it must be absolutely devastating. Not only have they lost a son and a brother, but it's sort of now played out and we're all talking about it on telly, which must make it, sort of super doubly, triply tough for them. But an extremely lovely guy, actually, I have to say, and it's very sad news. But for all those contestants involved and everyone who watched Idol, I think that there's always a place in our hearts with Darius because he was charming. And then, of course, after the series, Will and Gareth went on to do so well. Would anyone else have a chance? Well, actually, he sort of forged his own path. He turned down a career, or he turned down an opportunity with Simon Cowell to record an album and sort of went his own way, wanted to do some original material, wanted to have a number one song, dreamt of a number one album. He did both with a song and an album called Colorblind. And then he went on to the West End stage and, Billy Flynn in Chicago. He really forged a really good career for himself and then sort of ended up heading over to America. And we haven't seen too much of him since then, but generally a lovely, lovely fella and very sad. I think we all were when we heard yesterday. And Eamon, you must have met him many times, when he was doing that circuit post-Idol. And I'm sure he'll agree, such a lovely, charming young man.
Neil, I'm just listening to you, and you say how nice and charming he was, and just an approachable sort of guy. He certainly wasn't up himself in any way. And the sadness of all of this, his young age. I mean, goodness me, just to be 41. And it always struck me he had presence. The last time I saw him was at Belfast Airport, and he was so approachable, but yet he stood out. He couldn't help standing out, Neil, because he was so blooming good looking.
He was. There was in a way a bit of a touch of the sort of the leading man, a little bit of the Elvis about him as well, and he was really tall. So he was this very tall, good-looking fella. But I completely agree with you, Eamon. He was very approachable. I remember many times in those, watching him with fans and the sort of spirit of Idol, and then afterwards when he was his own man outside of the series, when fans would come up to him, he was very nice to them, loved having pictures, signing, chatting. He was just a very decent guy. I think he'd been brought up with some really good values by his mum and dad, and it didn't change him. And that was the really nice thing. He lived pretty close to me, actually, in West London. And so, post-Idol, we'd often sort of get together and have a chat about how it was going, what he was up to, what the next song was going to be. And, he was always just a very nice fella.
From West London to the West End as well. I don't know if you would have thought, or you were sitting there as a judge, I don't know if you would have looked at him and thought, well, this guy has a future and a big future and a credible future on a theatrical stage, a West End stage.
Well, it's interesting because when you go through the sort of the audition processes on those kind of shows, there are some people you think may have a chance of being a pop star, in inverted commas. There are other people that you sort of say, well, they're a bit cabaret, and oh, that's a bit West End. It's almost you can split people, or they just can't sing. People tend to fall into those four categories. And with him, there was always something very big about him. He had a real presence to him. What actually really surprised me yesterday was when it was revealed he was only 41. So that meant during Idol he was only 21. And he definitely had a mature head on young shoulders, and probably looked slightly older than actually he was. And he had that kind of presence on stage. When he made it into Chicago and sort of became Billy Flynn, and then he did some other great West End shows as well, it didn't surprise me, because he had that kind of booming voice that could carry it off, and he had the kind of charisma, I think, that could really carry it off as well. And when you saw him in some of those roles as the leading man, it really suited him, I have to be honest. And you suddenly realized there might actually be another whole career outside of the charts, which can be a bit cutthroat and a bit, famous 1 second and no one knows who you are the next. He could forge himself as a different career and a different path in the West End, and who knows, into films as well, because he definitely had those kind of looks. And he did well. He did well, and the reviews were great. I went to see him in the West End, and he was excellent. And so all those bits, added together, it just makes it equally tragic. And now just, a 41-year-old man, and sadly no longer, a tragedy.